Billionaire's wife spilled wine on a black CEO seconds later. Her legacy collapsed. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. The chandeliers above the Belmont Royal Ballroom shimmered like frozen stars. Laughter ricocheted off marble columns and crystal glasses clinked in rehearsed rhythm. At the center table, a circle of tuxedos and diamonds glowed under the golden light, the kind of light that flatters power and exposes arrogance. That's when it happened. A woman in a white strapless gown, hair sculpted and smile sharp as glass, lifted her wine. Clara Shaw, wife of billionaire investor Richard Shaw, self-appointed royalty of the evening. Across from her stood a man in a sand-colored suit, tall, calm, his phone at his ear. Darius Cole. He'd been invited quietly, anonymously, without fanfare. Clara's gaze slid over him like a test she'd already graded. "You lost, sweetheart," she asked, laughter bubbling out before he could answer. The group around her followed suit, the kind of laughter that seeks permission before it starts. Darius didn't flinch. "Excuse me," he said into his phone, voice steady. But Clara stepped closer, eyes gleaming with mock pity. "Oh, don't tell me you're one of the waiters trying to network." Then came the flick of her wrist. The red wine arced through the air, a bright, deliberate streak that hit his chest and splattered across the pale fabric. The gasp that followed wasn't of remorse. It was satisfaction. Clara smirked, raising her glass like a trophy. "You think you're equal?" Laughter again. Louder this time. Someone whispered, "Guess they'll let anyone in these days." Another man fumbled for his phone, half recording, half entertained. Darius looked down at the stain spreading across his shirt. He didn't reach for a napkin, didn't react, just lifted his head, eyes, calm, voice low, a tone that sliced cleaner than any shout. "Carla," he said softly into the phone, "end the $1 billion deal." The room froze. Forks stopped midair. Even the violinist missed a note. Clara blinked, uncertain whether she'd misheard. "What deal?" she laughed. "You must be joking." But Darius was already turning away, the crimson soaking into his shirt like a seal, not of shame but of closure. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply ended an empire with a single sentence. And that was the moment the laughter in the Belmont Royal began to sound like fear. The sound in the ballroom didn't fade all at once. It fractured, laughter dying in fragments, whispers rising like static under chandeliers. The only thing moving was Darius Cole brushing the sleeve of his jacket as if he'd simply spilled water, not humiliation. Near the edge of the room, Sofia Alvarez froze mid-step with a tray of champagne. She was 23, newest on staff, taught to serve quietly and vanish quicker. But she'd seen that face before on a Forbes cover, folded in her cousin's kitchen under the headline, "The Reluctant Visionary." It hit her now like a jolt. The man they'd just mocked was the founder of Coltech. No one else had noticed. Or maybe they had and didn't care. At the center table, Clara dabbed fake concern with a napkin, murmuring, "Oh, come on, it's just wine, he'll survive." The men around her chuckled obediently. Even the string quartet tried to restart the music, bow trembling on strings. The melody came out crooked. Sofia set the tray down, eyes darting toward Darius. He was still on the phone, voice low, measured. His calm made her nervous. The kind of calm that only exists right before the ground splits open. "Security might want to escort him out," someone whispered near the bar. "He's upsetting the guests." "No," Clara replied, her tone sugar wrapped around venom. "He's entertaining them." The remark floated through the air like perfume, sweet, poisonous, and meant to linger. Sofia's chest tightened. She'd cleaned tables in this hotel long enough to know the pattern, the subtle insult, the chorus of polite laughter, the collective shrug that followed. It always ended the same: silence from the victim, satisfaction from the crowd. But not this time. Across the table, Darius slipped his phone into his jacket pocket. For a moment his gaze lifted, not at Clara, not even at her husband Richard, who now looked pale and confused, but at the chandelier above its crystal edges, refracting light into sharp fragments. His reflection shimmered there, small, distant, but unbroken. Then his eyes met Sofia's. Just a second, but long enough for her to understand something wordless. "Stay still. Watch closely." A waiter whispered, "He's leaving." But Darius didn't move toward the exit. He turned instead toward the stage where a giant LED screen cycled through sponsor names: Shaw Holdings, Belmont, Royal Coltec Alliance. The crowd began to murmur. A few phones buzzed with notifications, faint pings breaking the tension. "Is it true?" someone asked quietly. "Did he just pull the funding?" Richard Shaw's phone lit up. The color drained from his face. He excused himself from the table, muttering something to Clara that didn't sound like anger. It sounded like fear. Sophia watched Clara's smile falter for the first time. Her laughter caught in her throat as if the room's air had turned thick. Around them, the temperature seemed to change, not colder but heavier, like the space itself had begun to listen. Darius adjusted his cufflinks, expression unreadable. "Enjoy your evening," he said softly, words barely above a whisper but cutting through the room like wind through silk. He wasn't leaving in defeat. He was resetting the entire hierarchy of the night. Sophia exhaled slowly, realizing what she was witnessing wasn't revenge. It was balance returning to the room. As Darius walked past her, she heard the quiet hum of his phone vibrate again. One single message glowing on the screen before it dimmed. "Deal terminated. Announcement pending." Sophia didn't move. The tray on her table trembled slightly from her grip. Above them, the chandeliers swayed just a little, as if even the glass understood something monumental had shifted. And somewhere behind her, Clara's laughter tried to start again, but this time it sounded hollow like applause after the curtains already fallen. The hum of the chandeliers was gone now. In its place came the digital buzz of phones. One, then another, then 20 more. Notifications rippled through the ballroom like falling dominoes. On every screen, the same breaking alert flashed: Coltec withdraws $1B merger with Shaw Holdings, effective immediately. The words landed like thunder. Conversations splintered. Waiters froze mid-pour. Somewhere near the bar, a woman gasped, "Oh my God, that's tonight's host." Clara Shaw's smile collapsed an inch at a time. She turned to her husband, whose phone was still vibrating in his trembling hand. "Richard, tell me this is some kind of PR stunt." He didn't answer. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, locked on the message that had just erased 10 years of work. At the far end of the hall, Sophia pressed herself against a marble column, watching. She felt the energy change, not chaos, not panic yet, just the slow, terrifying awareness that something irreversible had already happened. Darius stood near the stage, one hand in his pocket posture, calm but commanding. The light hit his face in a way that made him seem almost carved from the moment itself. A few reporters, people who'd come only for society gossip, were already lifting their phones, recording discreetly. Clara regained just enough breath to mutter, "He can't do that. Not here." But her voice trembled. Her audience had shifted. The same guests who had laughed minutes ago were now whispering, pulling up search results, connecting the dots. Coltec founder, keynote speaker at the Global Ethics Forum, largest private tech investor in the U.S. And then the realization spread like wildfire: the man in the stained beige suit owned the room, not the other way around. Sophia caught a snippet of conversation from two bankers by the dessert table. "He's the one who funds the renewable projects," one said. "The Shaws were depending on his deal to cover their debt," the other whispered. The music had stopped again. The silence wasn't awkward, it was verdict-like. Clara tried to reclaim the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, forcing a brittle laugh, "let's not overreact to rumors. This event is about unity," someone interrupted. It was a man in a dark blue suit stepping forward from the crowd. "You just threw wine on the man financing half this city's innovation grants." Gasps rippled. Clara's face turned pale. Her husband finally spoke, voice hoarse. "Clara, please, stop talking." Darius didn't move. He didn't need to. The truth was unraveling on its own. Behind him, the LED screen flickered again, the sponsors list updating in real time. One by one, the names of Shaw Holdings subsidiaries disappeared, replaced by a single glowing line of text: "Event presented in partnership with Coltec Foundation." The crowd erupted in whispers. Some guests backed away from Clara's table, others simply stared. The hierarchy was dissolving before their eyes. Sophia felt her throat tighten. She wasn't just witnessing humiliation, she was watching history's symmetry. The quiet man, made invisible by arrogance, had become the mirror that revealed it. A glass shattered somewhere near the buffet. Richard Shaw slammed his phone on the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he barked, voice cracking. Darius finally turned to face him. "Yes," he said simply. "I ended a partnership built on blindness." Every syllable landed like a gavel. No one clapped. No one dared move. The chandeliers reflected back hundreds of small faces, guests frozen between fear and awe, watching the balance of power tilt in real time. Sophia swallowed hard. She realized this wasn't the climax. It was the tremor before the collapse. And as the ballroom lights dimmed slightly, the automatic timer clicking over to evening mode, one thought pulsed through her mind, clear as the ringing silence around them. The night wasn't ending. It was beginning to remember who it belonged to. The ballroom was breathing now. Shallow, uneasy breaths that belonged to no one and everyone. The air shimmered with the metallic scent of spilled wine and panic. Sofia Alvarez could feel her pulse in her palms. She'd served hundreds of these events, always invisible, always polite. But tonight, the quiet rules of the service floor had cracked open and something raw was crawling out from under them. Truth. At the center of the chaos, Darius Cole still hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. His calm had become the gravity pulling the entire room toward honesty. Clara Shaw, pale and furious, stepped closer to him. "You've humiliated us in front of our guests," she spat. "You'll regret this." Darius met her gaze evenly. "No," he said. "You did that all by yourself." The words landed like a soft explosion. Even the violinist who had tried to restart the music set his bow down, realizing this wasn't a performance anymore. It was a reckoning. Sophia's manager hissed beside her, "Don't get involved. Stay behind the line." But her feet didn't listen. Because in that moment she realized the line was exactly the problem, the invisible border that separated those who spoke from those who stayed silent. Her voice came out small at first. "Mrs. Shaw," she said barely above a whisper. No one heard. Then louder, "Mrs. Shaw." Heads turned. Dozens of them. A server had spoken out of turn. Clara's eyes snapped to her, cold and incredulous. "What is it?" she demanded. Sophia's hands trembled, but her voice steadied. "You should know who you just insulted," Clara sneered. "A man who can't handle a glass of wine?" "No," Sophia said, taking one step forward. "The man who funded this event. The man whose foundation paid for your scholarships, your gala, your reputation." A ripple passed through the guests. Someone whispered, "She's right. Check the event site." A few began scrolling, eyes widening at the Coltech Foundation logo that had quietly sat at the bottom of every invitation. Richard Shaw's head dropped into his hands. Oh God, Darius didn't speak. He let Sophia's words do the work. She stood there in her server's uniform, back straight, eyes blazing, her accent cutting through the air like a melody that refused to be silenced. "You called him unworthy," she continued, "but you're standing on his generosity. That's not class. That's blindness." No one clapped. They didn't dare. But the silence that followed wasn't hostile anymore. It was reverent. Like the room itself had chosen sides. Clara's lips parted, but no words came out. The power had shifted entirely. The cameras from the press corner began to rise, shutters clicking softly. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was evidence. Sophia's manager tugged her sleeve, whispering, "You're going to lose your job." Sophia looked straight ahead. "Then, at least I'll lose it telling the truth." Darius's eyes softened, a flicker of something human breaking through the steel. He gave her the smallest nod, not gratitude, not approval, acknowledgement, equal to equal. For the first time, Clara seemed to realize the magnitude of what she'd done. Her voice cracked. "You all think you know the story, but this is out of context." Sophia stepped closer, steady now. "No, ma'am, this is the context. You just didn't like the camera angle." A gasp rolled through the room, half shock, half catharsis. The event host, finally regaining composure, leaned into the microphone on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," he stammered, but his voice was drowned out by the murmur of phones, recording by the sound of the world outside beginning to wake up. Sophia turned slightly toward Darius. "Sir," she said quietly, "you don't have to say anything." "I know," he replied, "but they do." He glanced around the hall at the guests, the photographers, the investors pretending to check their watches, and the weight of his gaze was heavier than anger. It was expectation. The kind that makes everyone in the room decide what side of history they're standing on. Sophia realized she was shaking, but not from fear, from relief. For once the truth had made noise loud enough to drown out money. And in that trembling quiet, Darius spoke again. Not to Clara, not to Richard, but to everyone. Silence isn't neutral. It's permission, and I think we've all given enough of that tonight. No one looked away this time. The chandeliers flickered, the cameras kept rolling, and Sophia understood that a single voice, even one wearing an apron, could tilt a kingdom. For a moment, no one breathed. The ballroom, drenched in gold and gilt, held its silence like glass about to shatter. Clara Shaw's face had drained of color, leaving only pride, the kind that burns slow before it explodes. Her husband sat motionless beside her, the weight of a ruined empire pressing down on his shoulders. Around them, cameras blinked like restless eyes, and the whispers had sharpened into blades. Darius Cole remained still, his posture precise, his calm a quiet provocation. The calm of a man who no longer needed to defend himself. Clara couldn't stand it. "You think this is over?" she hissed, stepping toward him. Her heels struck the marble like gunshots. "You embarrassed my family in front of everyone who matters. You won't walk away from this." She reached out, a flash of red nails, trembling with fury, and grabbed his sleeve. The room broke open. Gasps cut through the air, champagne glasses tipped, and somewhere near the corner, a reporter's camera clicked mid-freeze. That single gesture, a hand-gripping power she couldn't control, became the story. Darius didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply looked down at the fingers on his arm, as if studying a line he'd already decided to erase. "Take your hand off me," he said quietly. His voice wasn't angry. It was surgical. Sophia stepped forward instinctively. "Ma'am, please don't." But Clara's anger had already crossed the point of return. "You ruined my name," she shouted, her voice breaking into the microphone feedback. "You think money makes you respectable, you'll never be that enough." The word came from somewhere behind Darius, a low female voice, precise, calm. Every head turned. The LED screen behind the stage flickered again, and a live video feed appeared, Carla Bennett, Darius's chief operations officer, joining remotely from Coltech's headquarters. "Mr. Cole," she said, her tone even, "we've logged the incident. The footage from multiple angles is streaming as we speak. Do you want me to proceed?" Clara froze. "Footage?" she echoed. "Yes," Carla replied through the speakers. "Your gala has been recording since the opening toast, for transparency." The silence that followed was radioactive. Sophia watched Clara's hand slide away from Darius's sleeve as if it had touched fire. The crowd shifted, murmurs turning into open disgust. Guests stepped back, separating themselves physically and morally from the Shaws. Darius exhaled slowly. He looked at Clara, then around the room, and finally at Sophia. "You see," he said softly, "it's never just one insult. It's a pattern pretending to be a mistake." The lights seemed to dim around him, as though the chandeliers themselves had leaned in to listen. Clara tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "You can't just destroy people because you feel offended." Sophia answered before Darius could. "No, ma'am. He didn't destroy you. You just showed everyone what destruction looks like when it wears a gown." Someone near the back whispered, "She's done." A reporter spoke into his phone, already narrating live. "What began as a private charity gala has turned into a public reckoning." And then the sound returned. The shuffling of guests, the click of cameras, the quiet panic of reputations unraveling in real time. Darius's eyes softened for a moment. His voice lowered. "You touched me," he said, "not to accuse, but to mark the moment. That's where this ends." He turned slightly, his reflection multiplied across the mirrored walls, one man, 100 echoes of composure. Sophia's heart pounded. She knew what was coming next. The calm before the reveal, the quiet before the avalanche. Clara's hand shook. Her lipstick had faded, her poise gone. She took a step back, but it was too late. The cameras had already captured the truth in 4K clarity, power caught in the act of desperation. And as Darius walked toward the center of the ballroom, the music started again, not from the quartet, but from the speakers above, a slow orchestral hum that seemed to rise from the floor itself. Sophia felt goosebumps crawl up her arms. Every story she'd ever heard about justice sounded distant compared to this. Justice delivered quietly, elegantly, in front of everyone who thought they'd never be judged. And then, like a calm tide before the storm, Darius whispered into his phone, "Carla, prepare the system." The next part, everyone could feel it, wasn't going to be silent at all. The hum that followed his words wasn't from the orchestra this time. It was from the servers. A faint mechanical vibration rippled beneath the marble floor, as if the entire building had just taken a breath. Darius Cole didn't raise his hand or his tone. He simply said, "Carla, execute the shutdown." On the massive LED screen behind him, the event's sponsor list began to flicker again, lines of digital text rearranging like nervous thoughts. Shaw Holdings, access revoked. Belmont Trust, suspended. Coltech Foundation, primary controller, De Cole. Gasps broke through the ballroom. The crowd turned from watching him to watching the screen, then back again, the room's energy tilting from gossip to awe. Carla's voice came steady through the speakers, calm as an automated prayer. Confirmed. Legal notifications dispatched. Financial systems locked. Public statement drafted for release in 3 minutes. Richard Shaw's phone started vibrating again, harder this time, as if panicking. He stared at the display, bank access denied. Then another message, partnership terminated, assets frozen. He looked up at Darius, disbelief clawing at his face. You don't have that authority. Darius met his gaze, unmoving. I built the platform your company runs on. I own the code, Richard. You leased your power from me. The room erupted in murmurs, flashes of light from recording phones bouncing off the chandeliers. Sophia, standing near the center table, could feel the hum in the floor strengthen. Not just sound now, but vibration, the pulse of a network realigning itself to truth. Clara tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. This is insane. You'll destroy everything we've built. Darius took one step toward her. Everything you've built, he said evenly, was standing on the foundation of someone you refused to see. Carla's voice returned, softer now, almost reverent. Press conference link active. Do you want to go live? Darius paused, looking around the room at the luxury, the lies, the legacy. Then, with a breath so controlled it felt premeditated, he said, Yes, go live. A red indicator light blinked on the screen. Live stream started, and suddenly the world was watching. Reporters straightened their ties. Guests froze mid-step. Every sound in the ballroom was magnified, including the stutter in Clara's breath. Good evening, Darius began, voice amplified now through the room and across every major network linked to the gala. You came here tonight to celebrate a partnership. Instead, you witnessed what happens when arrogance forgets who funds it. Each sentence struck with surgical rhythm. He wasn't ranting. He was documenting. Sophia felt her eyes sting. Not from pity, from recognition. This wasn't about one man and one insult. It was about every quiet dismissal, every polite humiliation that had gone unrecorded until now. Darius continued, turning slightly toward the cameras. Integrity isn't a donation. It's a debt. And tonight I've collected mine. A standing silence followed, the kind that weighs more than applause. Behind him, the live feed split into 2 panels. On the left, a trembling Clara Shaw, frozen in disbelief. On the right, the updated partnership registry confirming Coltech's acquisition of their entire joint venture. One move, one click. The entire Shaw empire folded into his control. The guests weren't whispering anymore. They were witnessing. Sophia caught her reflection in a mirrored pillar, her eyes wide, mouth slightly open. For the first time, she wasn't invisible in the reflection. She was part of the moment. Clara took a small step back. This can't be legal, she muttered. We'll sue. Darius looked at her with something between exhaustion and mercy. You can't sue gravity, he said. You just learn not to fall. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Carla's voice came through one last time. System update complete. Transition confirmed. Shall I end the feed? Darius nodded. End it. The red light blinked off. The room, once glittering with vanity, now shimmered with something colder, accountability. Sophia felt her breath finally leave her chest. Around her, the crowd didn't clap. They didn't dare. But the silence itself felt like standing ovation, the sound of respect returning to its rightful owner. And as Darius turned to leave, the faint hum of the servers faded with him, the empire dismantled, the balance restored. The red light on the camera died. But the echo of what had just happened still vibrated through the air, as if the marble itself was replaying every word. People were frozen mid-thought. No one dared to move first. Even the chandeliers seemed hesitant to sparkle. Then slowly, Darius Cole turned back toward the crowd. His steps were measured, quiet, deliberate, the way a judge walks after the verdict's already been delivered. Mr. Cole, one of the reporters, began, but his voice faltered under the weight of the silence. Darius stopped beside the table where Clara stood, trembling but still pretending composure. Her gown, once a symbol of untouchable status, now looked like armor cracking at the seams. You wanted to know if this is over, Darius said, voice low. It is. He wasn't angry. That was what made it terrifying. His tone carried the stillness of someone who'd seen this pattern 1,000 times and decided it ended here. You called me unworthy, he continued, eyes fixed on Clara, in a room I own. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The words hit harder for their calmness, each syllable landing like a hammer cushioned in velvet. Clara's lips parted. No sound came out. The guests exhaled collectively as if they'd been holding their breath for hours. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, he owns the building." Richard Shaw looked up sharply, the realization slicing through him. "The Belmont Royal, it's under Coltech's real estate branch," he murmured, too stunned to sound defensive. A ripple of shock traveled through the guests, heads turning, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Every eye in the room snapped back to Darius. He let the silence do the work. Sophia felt chills run through her arms. The man in front of her wasn't just reclaiming dignity, he was rewriting the social hierarchy in real time. Darius took another step closer to Clara, not threatening, just enough for her reflection to appear beside his in the mirrored wall behind them. She saw it too. The image of power she'd always assumed belonged to her kind, now mirrored with the man she tried to humiliate. "Do you know what equality sounds like?" he asked quietly. "It's silence, when people finally have nothing left to say." Then he turned to the guests. His gaze swept across the room like light catching dust. "You all laughed," he said evenly. "And maybe you didn't mean harm. Maybe it's just habit." He let that word linger. Habit. But every habit that humiliates someone still makes you smaller than them. No one met his eyes. Sophia watched Clara's shoulders sink, pride collapsing like a tent with its poles cut. Even her pearls seemed duller now, like they'd absorbed the shame. Then Darius did something no one expected. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded napkin, the same one he'd used earlier to wipe the wine from his chest. He placed it gently on the table in front of her. "This," he said, "is the only stain that mattered tonight." Clara stared at it, blinking fast, her chin trembling. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because," he replied, "you'd never learn if I walked away angry. You'll only remember who stayed calm." Sophia felt her throat tighten. The crowd did too. The room pulsed with that strange blend of shame and admiration only truth can create. From somewhere near the back, a woman said softly, "He didn't humiliate her. He educated her." Darius turned toward the exit but stopped midway, glancing over his shoulder. The camera crew was still rolling despite the live feed being cut. He met the lens directly, expression unreadable. "Before you post this," he said, "remember to include the part where she said, 'You think you're equal?'" He paused, just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of what came next. "Because I didn't prove I was. I just reminded her she was wrong." The room exhaled like it had been freed. Sophia felt tears sting behind her eyes, not of sadness but relief. For once the ending didn't belong to cruelty, it belonged to clarity. As Darius walked away, the marble floor reflected his stride in perfect symmetry. No guards, no entourage, just one man leaving behind the ruins of arrogance. And in the reflection, for the first time, even the chandeliers seemed to bow. The sound returned in fragments, heels clicking glasses, trembling, someone whispering a prayer they didn't believe in. The empire of the Shaws was dissolving, not with fire, but with silence. On the giant LED screen behind the stage, the corporate ticker updated one final time. Coltech assumes full control of Shaw Holdings. Effective immediately. No music, no applause. Just a line of text that ended an era. Richard Shaw stared at it, his jaw slack, a man watching his own signature vanish in real time. The shareholders in the audience began stepping away, some avoiding his eyes, others already typing messages to new contacts. Clara's phone slipped from her hand. It hit the floor, the screen shattering. A perfect metaphor, Sophia thought, for what pride looks like when it meets truth. Darius stood motionless near the center of the ballroom, hands clasped loosely in front of him. His stillness carried more gravity than any speech could. Then Carla Bennett's voice returned through the sound system, calm and absolute. "Transfer confirmed. All Shaw financial systems are now secured under Coltech supervision. Access for previous executives has been revoked." The words rolled through the room like a verdict. Clara stumbled back a step. "You can't," but she stopped, because everyone in the room knew he already had. Darius turned toward her. His tone was measured, but the authority in it was undeniable. "Tonight wasn't about you," he said. "It was about a system that rewards disrespect and calls it sophistication." He nodded once to Sophia, who still stood near the serving table, hands trembling but eyes steady. "Thank you for speaking when it mattered." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I just said the truth, and that," Darius replied, "is the rarest luxury in this room." A few guests began clapping softly, hesitant, unsure if it was allowed. But once the first sound broke, others followed. The applause grew, not wild, not theatrical, but steady, deliberate, like rain after a long drought. Clara looked around, bewildered. The people who used to orbit her were now facing him. Even the event host bowed his head slightly, as if acknowledging where real authority now stood. End the event, Richard muttered hoarsely. Now. The host hesitated, glancing at Darius for permission. Darius gave a small nod. Yes. End it. The chandeliers dimmed, the lights softened, and the great Belmont Royal, their supposed kingdom, transitioned itself into quiet surrender. Sophia took a slow breath, trying to steady the rush in her chest. She looked at Darius again, not as a billionaire or a headline, but as proof that restraint can roar louder than revenge. As guests filed toward the exit, whispers followed him. He owns everything. Did you see how calm he was? That's real power. Clara stayed behind her gown, pooling like spilled milk around her feet. She tried to speak, to apologize, to claw back control, but the words wouldn't come. Every sentence she'd ever used to define herself had just lost its meaning. Darius looked at her one last time. You asked earlier if this would ruin you, he said softly. It won't. You'll ruin yourself if you don't change. She opened her mouth, but he'd already turned away. Sophia watched him head toward the grand staircase. The marble caught his reflection again, a faint shimmer following each step like a trail of consequence. When he reached the door, he paused and glanced back at the room. The broken glass, the fading chandeliers, the guests who couldn't stop staring. Then, in a voice that barely needed volume, he said, "This is what accountability looks like. It doesn't shout. It just stays." He left the ballroom. Outside, the night air was sharp and clear. Somewhere behind him, the servers powered down, the digital heartbeat of an empire gone still. Sophia lingered by the doorway, heart, full eyes wide, realizing she'd witnessed something that would outlive gossip, outlast wealth, outshine arrogance. Inside, Clara sank into a chair alone for the first time in years. The echo of applause still lingered faintly, but none of it was for her. Outside, the night was colder than the ballroom had been. Clean air, quiet street, a sky heavy with rain that never quite fell. The valet line was empty. Now the guests gone, the luxury cars idling like confused witnesses. Darius Cole stood beneath the portico still and centered a silhouette against the marble glow. The noise of the city moved around him, unaware that something historic had just ended 3 floors above. He exhaled slowly. The taste of the night felt different, lighter, honest. For the first time in hours, he loosened his tie. Behind him, the doors of the Belmont Royal opened. Sophia Alvarez stepped outside, still in her uniform, clutching her notepad as if it could anchor her to reality. "Sir," she called softly. He turned. The air between them felt heavier than words. "I just wanted to say, I've never seen anything like that," she said. "You didn't yell. You didn't fight. You just changed everything." Darius smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held no triumph, only understanding. "People think power is noise," he said. "But noise fades. Standards stay." Sophia nodded, eyes glistening. "She'll never forget this." "She's not supposed to," he replied. "None of them are. The point wasn't to humiliate her. It was to remind her that arrogance isn't a birthright." For a moment, they both stood in the cold, listening to the faint hum of the streetlights. Then Sophia asked, "What happens now?" Darius looked up toward the ballroom windows where the last lights were flickering off. "Now," he said quietly, "now the silence does its job." He started to walk toward the curb where his car waited. No driver, no entourage. Just a sleek black sedan reflecting the city's lights. But before opening the door, he stopped, turned slightly toward her. "Do you know what saved that room tonight?" he asked. Sophia hesitated. "You," he shook his head. "You, the moment you spoke, the balance changed. Justice doesn't need $1 billion. It needs someone brave enough to say, 'That's not right.'" Sophia blinked back tears. "I was scared. You were supposed to be," he said gently. "That's how courage starts." She smiled, the kind that comes after surviving a truth. "Will I lose my job?" Darius opened the car door and looked back over his shoulder. "Not tonight. Report to Coltech headquarters on Monday. We'll find a better use for your honesty." Her jaw dropped. I mean, he said, "I could use someone who remembers what decency looks like." The car door shut quietly behind him. The engine purred to life, smooth and unhurried. Sophia stood there, hands trembling, trying to process that her smallest act had rewritten the ending of a story she was never supposed to be in. As the sedan pulled away, the rain finally began, light drops tapping the marble steps, washing away the last traces of spilled wine. Inside the car, Darius watched the city roll by. Reflections of neon and headlights streaked across the window like faint memories. He didn't smile this time. He didn't need to. His phone buzzed a message from Carla. Press calling for a statement. He typed back, they already heard it. Then after a pause, he added one more line, the kind that would end up on every quote card, every reel, every classroom screen that taught dignity over ego. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the standard. The car turned the corner headlights fading into the night. Back at the hotel, Sophia looked up at the glowing sign that read Belmont Royal, soon to be renamed the Coal Royal. She whispered into the rain almost like a prayer. Maybe justice isn't loud, maybe it's just steady. Her reflection shimmered in a puddle at her feet, apron-weary eyes and a small, unshakable smile. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. And somewhere beyond the sound of rain and traffic, the faint echo of calm power lingered, the kind that doesn't need permission to be heard.